Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and asked yourself why the person you trusted most could betray you in the cruelest way imaginable? Have you ever felt your world shatter in an instant when the truth was revealed, and you realized you'd been living a lie for years? Our story today is not just about a broken marriage, but about the pain, the awakening, and the journey toward rebirth of a woman pushed to her absolute limit. This is a story for anyone who has been hurt, who has cried in silence, and who thought they could never get back up again. Stay with us, and if you see a part of yourself in this pain, don't forget to subscribe so we can continue sharing stories of healing and awakening together. 10 minutes ago, exactly 10 minutes ago, I was still the legal wife of Ethan Hayes. The ink was barely dry on our divorce papers. The judge had just struck his gavel on the bench, declaring our 7-year marriage officially over. I didn't cry. It was strange. My chest felt no pain, no ache like I had expected. It was hollow and cold, just like the air in this New York County courthouse. I glanced at the man sitting next to me, the man I once called my husband, the man I had dedicated 7 years of my youth to loving and serving. He didn't look at me. His eyes were fixed on the expensive watch on his wrist, his fingers tapping impatiently on the polished table. For him, it seemed our 7 years together was just a tedious transaction that needed to be wrapped up quickly. Finally, he turned to me. There was still a smile on his lips, but his eyes held a cold calculation I had never noticed in my blindness of love. "It's finally over, Isabella. The card. I need it to pay Crystal's hospital bill. Then we can go our separate ways. Cleanly." His words were like a sharp blade delivering the final stab to my already scarred heart. Pay his mistress's hospital bill. He didn't even try to hide it. He treated my sacrifice and tolerance as his right. "Fine," I replied, in a voice that was surprisingly calm. I stood up and straightened my dress, not giving him another glance. "Congratulations. You're about to be a father." I turned and started walking. I could clearly hear him calling after me. "Hey, the card! Give it to me first." I didn't answer. I just kept walking, out through the heavy oak doors of the courthouse. 7 years ago, in this very building, we had joyfully held hands to file our marriage license. 7 years later, I walked out alone, but with a strange sense of lightness. 7 years. Not an eternity, but long enough for a woman like me to pour my entire heart, all my talent, into building an empire for the man I loved. I am Isabella Vance. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance from NYU, holding 2 international certifications. I turned down a lucrative offer to work on Wall Street because of a promise from Ethan. "Just stay by my side, Isabella," he'd said. "We'll build our own success together." And I believed him. I used all my knowledge and intellect in the stock market and in high-risk investments, but I never stepped into the spotlight. I stayed in the background, a good wife, a silent advisor. Every analysis, every investment decision, every business plan came from me. And Ethan? All he had to do was wear elegant suits, attend lavish parties, and speak the eloquent words I had prepared for him. He became a successful young entrepreneur, a role model in everyone's eyes. And I was content with my role, happy to see him shine. I was the one who handed him the unlimited black card, directly linked to the immense fortune I had quietly created. I told him, "Use this for work, for your parents. Don't let anyone look down on our family." And he used it. He used it to buy luxury cars, designer clothes, and expensive gifts for his parents. He used it to flaunt his status to his friends. And, as it turned out, he also used it to support another woman, to build another home behind my back. I descended the courthouse steps. The glaring New York sun made me squint. The weakness and pain of the past few days seemed to have been left behind those courtroom doors. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the city's warm, humid air. It was time to end this charade. Calmly, I took my phone out of my purse. The screen lit up. Without hesitation, I opened my banking app. My fingers moved swiftly across the screen, familiar with every icon, every number. I went to the card management section and found the image of the powerful black card. Below it was a clear red line of text, "Permanently block card." I had stared at those words countless times during sleepless nights, hesitating, lying to myself that maybe things weren't as they seemed. But Ethan's words, just 10 minutes ago, had shattered every last illusion. I closed my eyes. The image of Ethan and his mistress, Crystal Sanders, embracing, flashed in my mind. The image of my mother-in-law, Brenda, who always said she loved me like a daughter, tenderly stroking the woman's pregnant belly, her eyes shining with joy. They were a family. I was just an outsider. An ATM, no different from any other machine. I opened my eyes, my gaze hardening, my finger pressed down firmly on the red text. A notification popped up. Are you sure you want to permanently block this card? All future transactions will be instantly declined. Without a shred of doubt, I pressed confirm. A soft beep sounded from the phone. It was done. The final tie, the financial leash, was cut. From this moment on, Ethan Hayes could not spend another cent of my wealth. But that wasn't enough. I exited the banking app and opened another, the flight booking app. I chose the destination, Sydney, Australia. The earliest flight, first class, one way. I had promised myself that after I helped Ethan stabilize his career, I would treat myself to a trip to Australia to see the shell-shaped opera house I had always dreamed of. Today, I was fulfilling that promise not as a tourist on vacation, but as a person seeking freedom, flight information, passport details. I had prepared everything days ago. All I had to do was press pay. A new beginning, a new life, awaited me on the other side of the world. Meanwhile, about 15 miles from the courthouse, the atmosphere in the VIP waiting lounge of the International Medical Center NYC was the complete opposite. Ethan Hayes sat there, his face glowing with happiness. He wasn't worried that he couldn't contact me. In his mind, I was probably an old chapter, already closed, a debt, already paid. Now, he was welcoming a new, brighter chapter. Beside him, Crystal leaned on his shoulder, her hand resting on her swollen belly. Her pretty face was a bit tired, but it couldn't hide her happiness and pride. Ethan's mother, Brenda, was there too. She paced back and forth, unable to contain her smile, holding her phone and talking loudly to relatives back in Ohio. "It's soon. Any minute now, sis," she chirped. "The doctor said it might be tonight. My first grandchild, a boy. You know, he's going to be so handsome, just like his father." She glanced at her son and her future daughter-in-law with a look of immense pride. Her plan had been a resounding success. Her son would soon have an heir and would finally be free from that daughter-in-law who, though rich, was barren. And most importantly, she believed that, with my goodwill over the years and my guilt after the divorce, I wouldn't hesitate to give Ethan half the assets. With that, her family would ascend to the upper echelons of society. "Ouch, honey! It hurts!" Crystal suddenly cried out, wincing in pain. Startled, Ethan immediately stood up, his face etched with concern. "What is it? Are you going into labor?" A nurse quickly approached. "These are signs of labor. We need to process her admission and get a down payment as soon as possible." Of course. Whatever it costs, just tell me," Ethan replied, full of confidence. He thought of the black card in his wallet and felt like a king. He turned to calm Crystal. "Don't worry, honey. You go on in. I'll take care of everything. The best maternity package, the presidential suite. You won't have to worry about a thing." Then, he and Brenda walked towards the cashier, imagining how everyone would admire him. He had no idea that the glittering performance he and his family had staged was about to come to a miserable end. How would he react when he discovered his all-powerful card had become a worthless piece of plastic? And what would the doctor's words be that would push him off the cliff of his own reality? If you're curious about what happens next, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next thrilling chapter. The cashier's counter at the International Medical Center NYC was brightly lit, even in the evening. The cold, white light shone on Ethan Hayes' pride-filled face. He casually pulled out his branded wallet, a birthday gift from me, and took out the sleek black card. He didn't hand it to the clerk right away. Instead, he deliberately twirled it in his fingers, just enough for Brenda and a few people nearby to see. This was the symbol of power, of wealth, of the status he had always craved. He cleared his throat, adopting the air of a successful man taking charge. "The best package for my wife, miss. The presidential suite, special care services. All the best." Money is no object. His voice boomed with an arrogance that suggested he was bestowing a great favor. Brenda, standing beside him, was beaming, a wide grin on her face. Her son was so capable, so generous. Soon, his ex-wife would be gone with a small alimony payment as charity, while her son would have an heir and control of a vast fortune. How wonderful her life would be. He handed the card to the young woman at the counter with a self-satisfied smirk. She took it, a hint of admiration in her eyes, and quickly swiped it through the machine. Beep, a dry, flat sound echoed. Her brow furrowed. She tried again. The same sound, accompanied by a red message on the screen. "Sir," the clerk said, her voice hesitant, "your card isn't working." The smile on Ethan's face froze. The pride on his face was instantly replaced by annoyance. "What did you say? Check your machine. It's impossible for this card not to work," he snapped, feeling embarrassed in front of his mother. "I've tried twice, sir," the clerk said, looking flustered. "Maybe you want to call your bank?" "Ridiculous," Ethan muttered, but he still took out his latest model phone. He didn't want to make a scene. He dialed the bank's VIP hotline, the number he always bragged about to his friends. The call connected instantly. "VIP hotline, how may I assist you, Mr. Ethan Hayes?" a sweet voice asked. "Check my card. Right now," Ethan commanded, his voice full of authority. "I'm at the hospital, and it's giving an error." The line went silent for a few seconds. The sound of typing could be heard. Then the agent spoke again, her voice no longer sweet but cold and professional. "Sir, according to our system, your card was permanently blocked by the primary account holder, Miss Isabella Vance, at approximately 11:25 a.m. this morning." Those words struck him like a bolt of lightning. Ethan was stunned. Permanently blocked. Isabella. Why would she do that? He couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Say that again." "Permanently blocked, sir. The card is completely inactive and cannot be reactivated." He hung up abruptly. His forehead was slick with sweat. His hands trembled as he dialed my number. "The number you have dialed is not in service at this time. Please try again later." The robotic voice from the network felt like an insult. He called again and again, but got the same response. Panic. Real panic. Brenda saw the change in her son's face and asked worriedly, "What happened? What did the bank say?" Ethan stammered, his voice shaking. I can't reach her. The card, it's been blocked." "The card is blocked?" Brenda shrieked, forgetting her public composure. "Why is it blocked? What did you do to her? Or maybe she found out about Crystal and she's getting revenge." "I don't know," Ethan yelled, his confusion turning to anger. "This morning at the courthouse, she was perfectly normal. She even congratulated me." "Normal? But she still did this." Brenda started her usual litany. "I told you, women with money aren't simple. See? She was just waiting for a chance to turn on us. Now what? Where are we going to get the money to pay for this hospital? Where is my grandchild supposed to be born? In some back alley?" Their argument started to draw the attention of people nearby. The cashier looked at them with a mixture of pity and impatience. "Sir, ma'am, if you can't pay with this card, could you use another card or cash? The patient needs to be admitted." His face burning with shame and anger, Ethan was cornered. He turned to his mother and whispered, "Mom, do you have any money?" Brenda's eyes widened. "My money? It's not enough to pay for this hospital. Do you think this is a corner store? I only have a few thousand on my debit card." In the end, after a heated argument, Brenda was forced to use her savings card to pay a small down payment. The dream of a presidential suite and special care vanished. They were forced to register for a standard delivery room, shared with other patients. The first slap had landed, not physically painful, but deeply, morally humiliating. As that drama unfolded, thousands of miles away from the chaos and shame, I was sitting in the first-class cabin of an Airbus, a 380. The atmosphere was serene. The plush leather seat could recline into a flatbed. A flight attendant had just served me a glass of premium champagne. Tiny bubbles shimmered in the soft yellow light. I swirled the glass gently, looking out the window. Below, the white clouds were like a vast cotton blanket, covering the noisy city and all the pain I had left behind. I wasn't happy. My heart was calm, like a lake in autumn. Blocking the card was just the first step, a necessary move to sever the final connection. It didn't bring me joy, but a cold sense of clarity. I was no longer the Isabella of yesterday. I closed my eyes. The memories of the past 7 years replayed like a slow-motion film. I remembered one evening at a family gathering. We had only been married a year. Brenda deliberately brought up Crystal in front of me. Oh, Crease is just the sweetest girl. She may not have a fancy education, but she knows how to get along with people. Every word she says is a delight. Then she turned to me with a sly smile. Not like some people these days who only know what's in books and speak so bluntly. At the time, Ethan just smiled silently, while I felt a small sting in my heart. I thought, maybe his mom is just a very frank person. I remembered the night I stayed up for 3 days straight to finish a market analysis for a crucial real estate project. That analysis helped Ethan's company, a company I had funded and named after him, win a contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. At the victory party, in front of all the business partners, Ethan raised his glass and proudly declared that this success was due to his many sleepless nights of research. He never mentioned my name once, even though I was right there, smiling and congratulating him. My heart ached a little then, but I told myself, his success is my success, and I remembered that fateful day 3 months ago. The day my suspicions began to solidify. Ethan said he had a business trip to Chicago, but I accidentally saw a credit card statement with a transaction at a high-end jewelry store in Manhattan. I called him, pretending to just check in. He cheerfully told me he was in a meeting in Chicago, and the signal was weak. That blatant lie was what woke me up. I started my own investigation. I hired someone to follow him, and the truth that was uncovered was far crueler than I could have imagined. Crystal, the hospital visits, the growing baby in her womb. It turned out I wasn't the queen in my own castle. I was just a puppet in their show. I opened my eyes and took a sip of champagne. The slight bitterness lingered on my tongue. Blocking the card was just the beginning. My show was only just starting. Ethan Hayes, you and your family have gotten used to living on my money, accustomed to a fake life of luxury. Now, I will slowly take it all back, so you can face who you really are. A bare, naked reality. No money, no fame. I want to see, when you have nothing left, what will remain of the love you always preached about. The smooth hum of the airplane engine was like a lullaby. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace. This flight wasn't just taking me to a new land. It was bringing me back to myself. Back in the suffocating atmosphere of the hospital, after paying the down payment with her own savings, Brenda slumped into a chair in the waiting area, her face ashen. Her earlier excitement was completely gone, replaced by anger and worry. She muttered curses under her breath. Ungrateful wench. We fed her and took care of her for years, and now she abandons us like trash. Ethan leaned against a wall in a dark corner, his face still blank with shock. He couldn't understand why Isabella would act so cruelly, so suddenly. She was always so kind, so tolerant. Could it be that she knew everything? The thought made him shiver, but he quickly dismissed it. Impossible. He had been so careful. It must just be a fit of jealousy. He picked up his phone again, angrily sending me messages. Isabella, where are you? What are you doing? Do you know what kind of mess you're causing? Turn on your phone and call me right now. But all he received was silence. Every message sent was like a stone thrown into a bottomless lake. The foundation of the luxurious world he had built was beginning to crumble. He could feel a storm brewing, but he didn't know where it would come from or how devastating it would be. All he knew was that the wife he had always looked down upon had suddenly become a terrifying mystery. The red light above the operating room door glowed like a giant eye, staring down at the anxiety and turmoil on the faces of Ethan and Brenda. The hurried sound of gurney wheels, the shouts of doctors and nurses, the sharp smell of disinfectant, it all blended into a suffocating tension. Ethan signed the consent form for the surgery with a trembling hand, his signature a messy scrawl, the usual confidence and ease gone. Brenda, meanwhile, was praying, though it wasn't clear if it was for the safety of Crystal and the baby or for the security of her grandchild's claim. Time passed excruciatingly slowly. Every second felt like an eternity. Ethan paced back and forth in front of the operating room, his heart a mess of conflicting emotions. He was worried about his unborn child, but he was also constantly thinking about me. Where was that woman? Why had she acted so ruthlessly? Could she really know everything? No, he calmed himself. His act had been perfect, flawless. It had to be a blind fit of jealousy. He would find her later and reason with her. Yes, once his son was born, he would have the ultimate bargaining chip. He would have leverage to demand his share of the assets. Then, she would be the one on her knees, begging him. The thought gave him a sliver of confidence. He sat down next to his mother and said, "Mom, don't worry. Everything will be fine. My son will definitely be healthy." After more than an hour, the operating room doors swung open. A doctor with a kind but weary face emerged. The surgery was a success. Mother and baby are both safe. Ethan and Brenda breathed a collective sigh of relief and rushed forward. "Is it a boy, Doc?" Brenda asked immediately, her voice filled with excitement. "Yes, a healthy baby boy. 6 pounds, 8 ounces, the doctor said, though his smile seemed a bit forced. "You can go in and see the family now." They quickly put on gowns and masks and entered the recovery room. Crystal was lying on the bed, her face pale, but her eyes lit up when she saw Ethan. "Honey, our son, our son." Ethan held her hand, his voice thick with emotion. For the first time in his life, he felt the profound weight of being a father. A nurse brought over the baby, wrapped in a blue blanket. "Congratulations." Brenda eagerly took her grandson, a huge smile spreading across her face. "Oh, my grandson, thank God. He's so handsome. Look, Ethan, his nose is sharp like yours, and his mouth is just like yours too." Her praise was endless, her happiness overflowing. Ethan leaned in to look at his son, a wave of pride washing over him. This was his son, the continuation of his lineage, the proof of his success. He had it all now. A rich ex-wife who would soon be out of the picture, a beautiful mistress, and now a handsome son. What more could he ask for? But their joy was short-lived. As they were basking in their happiness, the senior doctor entered, followed by several other nurses. He gestured for everyone to be quiet, then looked directly at Ethan, his face devoid of a congratulatory smile, replaced by a strange seriousness. "Mr. Hayes, I need to speak with you privately." His voice was deep and steady, casting a heavy pall over the room. Brenda sensed something was wrong. "What's the problem, Doc? Is something wrong with my grandson?" "Please calm down, ma'am," the doctor said, his eyes still fixed on Ethan. "Could you step out into the hallway with me for a moment?" Ethan hesitated but eventually nodded. He handed the baby to his mother and followed the doctor out. The door was left slightly ajar, just enough for Brenda and Crystal to overhear their conversation. "Sir," the doctor began cautiously, "while we were running the preliminary tests on the baby, we noticed an abnormality in his blood type." Ethan's heart clenched. "Abnormality? What do you mean?" "The baby has blood type O negative. It's a rare blood type, but that's not the issue itself. The problem is, according to your medical records, you are type A positive, and the baby's mother, Miss Sanders, is also type A positive." Ethan didn't understand. "So, what's the problem with that? It's normal for parents and children to have different blood types, right?" he said, trying to sound knowledgeable. The doctor shook his head, patiently explaining. "Not exactly like that, sir. According to the basic laws of genetics, if both parents are type A, their child can only be type A or type O. However, in this case, you are both A positive, but the child is O negative. Medically and genetically, this is impossible. In simpler terms, two parents with type A blood cannot have a child with type O blood." The doctor paused, looking directly into Ethan's eyes, which were beginning to widen with horror. He delivered the final conclusion, a sentence that sounded like a death sentence. "Sir, based on these results, we have a medical basis to say that you cannot be the biological father of this child." The entire hospital hallway seemed to fall silent. Ethan stood there, the world spinning around him. He heard every word the doctor said, but his mind couldn't process it. Not the biological father. Impossible. He grabbed the wall to keep from falling. Inside the room, Brenda had heard everything. Her face went slack, her eyes wide with disbelief. She looked down at Crystal lying on the bed, then at the baby in her arms. A sudden wave of dizziness overcame her. Brenda let out a loud cry and fainted, collapsing to the floor. The baby in her arms fell, but was quickly caught by a nearby nurse. The entire ward erupted into chaos. Nurses shouting for a doctor, Crystal's hysterical sobs, Ethan muttering like a madman, "No, impossible." It all blended into a cacophony of tragedy and confusion. The paradise they thought they had reached had turned into hell in an instant. While the hospital was in turmoil, I was still in the air, flying towards the sunrise of a new life. I had no idea that karma had arrived for them far faster than I had anticipated. The truth, sometimes, is the cruelest form of revenge. Were you shocked by this turn of events? How will Ethan cope with this brutal reality, and what will become of Crystal and the baby? If you're eager to find out what happens next, don't hesitate to leave a comment below to share your thoughts. Your opinions are our greatest motivation to continue telling more compelling stories. The 14-hour flight finally ended. As the plane landed at Kingsford Smith International Airport in Sydney, I felt a new vitality fill my chest. The Australian sky was incredibly clear, the air fresh and cool, a world away from the suffocating heat of New York that I had left behind. Pulling my small suitcase, I walked through the bustling crowd, my heart at peace. No more calls begging for money. No more judgmental looks, no more lies. Here, I was just Isabella, an ordinary woman starting over. As soon as I walked out of the arrivals hall, I saw a familiar figure waving at me. It was Chloe Miller, my one and only best friend since college. She had been living in Australia for almost 10 years and was now a renowned architect. Chloe ran up and hugged me tightly. The hug was so tight and warm, as if trying to fill all the coldness I had endured. "You're finally here. You had me so worried," Chloe said, her voice trembling slightly. "How are you? Are you really okay?" I smiled, a genuine smile after so many days of pretending. I've never felt better. Chloe looked me over from head to toe and nodded. "You're pale, but your eyes have life in them again. Come on, let's go home. I've prepared a feast to celebrate your rebirth." Chloe's car sped along the wide, clean roads. On either side, jacaranda trees were in bloom, creating a beautiful purple canopy. Her apartment was in a high-end condominium complex overlooking Darling Harbor. From the balcony, you could see the entire panorama of the shell-shaped Opera House and the Sydney Harbor Bridge. It was the view I had dreamed of seeing for so long. "What do you think? Beautiful, right?" Chloe asked, standing beside me with her arms crossed. "Even more beautiful than I imagined," I replied, taking a deep breath of the salty sea air. "Thank you, Chloe. Thank you for always being there for me." "Are we really going to do the whole thank you thing?" Chloe said, nudging me lightly. "Have you forgotten? If you hadn't let me copy your notes in that advanced calculus class, I would have failed ages ago." We both laughed. The laughter was clear and joyful, as if washing away all our worries. That night, Chloe truly prepared a feast filled with all my favorite foods. We sat on the balcony, eating, drinking wine, and talking. I told her everything, from blocking the card and finalizing the divorce to the drama at the hospital, which my contacts had updated me on. Chloe just shook her head after hearing it all. "You reap what you sow." They were too greedy and too stupid. "But Isabella," Chloe looked at me seriously, "what's your next move? Are you just going to rest here for a while?" I nodded. "For now, yes. I need time to clear my head and figure out my plans for the future." "What about them?" Chloe asked. "Ethan and his family won't just stay quiet, especially when they find out you're not actually bankrupt." "I know," I said, taking a sip of wine, "but they don't know that what they're targeting is just the tip of the iceberg." Chloe raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I smiled, a mysterious smile. This was my biggest secret, a secret that even Ethan, the man who had shared my bed for years, knew nothing about. "Chloe, do you know why I let Ethan be the president of the company? Why I let him get all the fame? Because you loved him? You sacrificed for him?" Chloe guessed. "That was part of it," I said, shaking my head. "The main reason was that I didn't want anyone paying attention to what I was really doing." I began to explain to Chloe. In reality, the real estate company Ethan managed was just a front, a pawn on my chessboard. My main source of income, the massive fortune of over $150 million that I had accumulated, didn't come from those construction contracts. It came from the international financial investments I had been quietly making for years. I had my own team, a network of top financial experts around the world that I had cultivated since I was a student. We operated completely independently and secretly. All transactions were conducted through investment funds in Switzerland and Singapore. Ethan, with his superficial knowledge of finance, could never understand what I was doing. All he saw were the profit numbers I funneled into his company, and he assumed it was the result of his own hard work. Chloe's jaw dropped. My God, Isabella, you're a wolf in sheep's clothing. For 7 years, I thought you were just a doting wife living in her husband's shadow. I never imagined you were a secret financial mogul. I had no choice, I said with a sigh. From the beginning, I sensed the greed in Ethan's family. I knew that if I showed my true capabilities, they would never leave me alone. I created that front to protect myself and my real wealth. I hoped that if I treated them well, gave them enough support, they would let me be. But I was wrong. So what's your plan now? Chloe asked. Your revenge won't stop at just blocking a card, will it? Of course not, I replied, my eyes turning sharp. My dear mother-in-law is already planning to slander me, to paint me as a heartless, ungrateful woman. In that case, I'll show them just how terrifying a sheep can be when it sheds its fleece. I told Chloe my plan. I wouldn't rush. I would let them sink into the mess they created. I would wait until they were at their lowest point, at their most desperate. That would be the right time to deliver my final blow. I'm not just going to take back what's mine, I said in a cold voice. I will make them regret every lie, every act of exploitation, every tear I had to swallow for 7 years. I will make them understand that angering a kind woman has terrifying consequences. Chloe looked at me, and in her eyes, there was no fear, only admiration and complete support. All right, whenever you need me, I'll be your strongest backup. The dawn was slowly breaking over Darling Harbor. The first rays of sun hit the balcony, chasing away the darkness of the night. I raised my wine glass towards the opera house. A toast to rebirth, I whispered. Back in the United States, a family was drowning in the darkness of lies and despair. Here, a new dawn, a new life, was opening up for me. While I was breathing the air of freedom in Sydney, a true hell on earth was unfolding at the International Medical Center in New York. The cramped and suffocating standard maternity ward, with 4 beds crammed side by side, was filled with the smell of disinfectant and other unpleasant odors. It was a massive humiliation for Brenda and Ethan, who were used to a life of luxury. After fainting, Brenda was taken to the emergency room. When she regained consciousness, the first thing she did was not ask about Crystal or the baby's condition, but scream curses. Jinx, you cheat! You deceived my son! Where did you pick up that burden and bring it into our family? She pointed a finger straight at Crystal's face, who was lying weakly in bed, her face stained with tears. Brenda, what are you saying? Crystal whispered, her voice filled with anguish. I didn't do anything wrong. This baby is Ethan's son. You still dare to argue? Brenda lunged forward, intending to pull Crystal's hair, but was restrained by nurses and other families in the room. The doctor said it clearly. Your blood type and Ethan's make it impossible to have a child like that. Tell me, who did you sleep with? Who is that child's father? Ethan leaned against the wall, his face expressionless, like a statue. The intense shock had completely robbed him of his ability to think. He couldn't distinguish between reality and a nightmare. All he could hear was his mother's cursing, Crystal's crying, and the baby's wails. It all mixed into a chaotic noise that shattered his senses. He had once been so proud of this child, bragging to his friends, planning for a brilliant future. Now, it had all crumbled. The son he thought was his belonged to another man. He had been cheated, publicly shamed. This humiliation was far worse than me blocking his card, worse than losing his source of money. The argument escalated, drawing the attention of the entire ward. Doctors and nurses repeatedly intervened, asking the family to be quiet. This is a hospital, not a marketplace. But Brenda had lost all sense of reason. She screamed, "You all shut up! What do you know? My family has been deceived. I have to sort this out. Crystal, after crying her eyes out, seemed to regain some strength. She sat up and looked directly at Brenda, her eyes no longer weak but sharp. Who are you calling a cheat? Look at your son. Is he even worthy of loyalty? What is he? Just a freeloader, living off his wife, surviving on a woman's money. If it weren't for Isabella's money, what could he have given me? Crystal's words were like daggers, piercing Ethan's wounded ego. He rushed forward, raising his hand to slap her. Shut your mouth! But Crystal was no longer afraid. You're going to hit me? Go ahead, hit me. Let everyone see what you really are. A cowardly, worthless man who lives off his ex-wife. Ethan's hand stopped in midair. He looked around and saw the curious and mocking stares of the people around them. He lowered his hand, his teeth clenched. A war of glares erupted between them. Suddenly, Crystal laughed, a bitter and defiant laugh. Why wouldn't you? You're a coward. Ethan Hayes, listen to this. So what if you're not this child's father? You're not the only man in the world. Did you really think I need you? What did you say? Ethan stammered. I said, I don't need you anymore, Crystal said, her voice clear. I've had enough of you and your mother. You think I don't know anything? You promised me the world, that you would divorce Isabella and marry me, give me a proper status. But the truth is, you were just using me to have a child, to use that child as leverage to demand a bigger settlement from Isabella. You are a worthless human being. Ethan's entire scheme was laid bare by Crystal, right in front of his mother. Brenda was stunned. She knew her son was calculating, but she never expected him to be so vile and cunning. She looked at her son, then at Crystal, her mind a mess. How? How did you know? Ethan asked, his voice trembling. You think I'm an idiot? Crystal scoffed. Those times you secretly called your friends, the times you were drunk and rambling, I heard everything. I've known your plan for a long time. I just pretended not to know to see how far you would take your act. She then picked up the baby and tried to stand. All right, we're done here. We owe each other nothing. I'll raise this child myself. I don't need a father like you. And you? You can stay with your dear mother and your dream of riches. Let's see how you survive when your well runs dry. The door to the room slammed shut, leaving Ethan and Brenda frozen in place. Hell on earth wasn't poverty. Hell on earth was when all the lies were exposed, when the masks fell off to reveal the ugly, naked truth. Ethan sank to the floor, holding his head in his hands. He had lost everything: wife, money, son, and dignity. Brenda looked at her son, then at the closed door. She no longer had the strength to curse. Only one question repeated in her mind. What now? She didn't know that this was only the beginning. A more terrifying secret, a secret she had hidden for decades, was about to be revealed by the very daughter-in-law she had driven away. And at that moment, not just her son, but her entire family would be utterly destroyed. The shock at the hospital completely shattered Ethan's family. Brenda, after fainting several times, was forced to accept a harsh reality. The grandchild she had so eagerly awaited was not of her bloodline. This shame was more painful than losing a large sum of money. She became withdrawn, often sitting in one place, her eyes lifeless. Ethan, on the other hand, was like a wounded animal, lashing out in his own powerlessness. He no longer dared to go to the hospital, afraid to face Crystal, afraid to see the baby, and terrified of the mocking stares of others. He locked himself in a cheap, rented apartment, doing nothing but drinking and cursing all day. He blamed me for being a heartless woman, Crystal for being a cheat, and even God for being unjust. They say that in times of desperation, people can do the most insane things, and Crystal, after being humiliated and cast out, had nothing left to lose. She wasn't going to suffer alone. If she was going down, she was going to drag that entire hypocritical family down with her. A few days later, while Ethan was drunk, he received a text from Crystal. It wasn't a curse or a plea, but a photo and a short message. Look at this. Then you can decide if you still want to be a coward. It was a copy of an old birth certificate. The father's name was obscured, but the mother's name was Brenda, and the child's name was Ethan Hayes. What shocked Ethan was the mother's blood type. Oh, he clearly remembered that his medical records stated his mother was type B. Trembling, Ethan called Crystal. She told him coldly that his mother had been lying for years. Her real blood type was O, the same as Crystal's child. Then she delivered a final blow, a sentence that felt like an axe to his head. And you're not Mr. Hayes' biological son either. The phone fell to the floor. Ethan slumped down, his mind blank. This truth was far crueler. All the previous betrayals paled in comparison. This destroyed the very foundation of his identity. He wasn't the son of a respected man. He was the product of a secret affair. In a fit of madness, Ethan ran out, drove to his parents' house, and pounded on the door. When Brenda opened it, she was shocked to see her son's crazed state. Ethan silently showed her the cracked phone screen, where the image of the birth certificate was still visible. "Tell me," Ethan said, his voice dangerously low, "whose son am I?" Seeing the photo, Brenda's face went pale. She stumbled backward and began to make excuses, but Ethan wouldn't let her evade. He screamed, demanding an answer. "Am I Mr. Hayes' son or not?" Finally, Brenda collapsed to the floor, weeping and confessing. She apologized, saying she never meant to hide it. The revelation of this truth completely destroyed Ethan Hayes' world. In the middle of their well-appointed living room, he felt an overwhelming sense of desolation. He hated me, and he hated Crystal, but now he realized the biggest liar of all was his own mother. And in that moment, he understood that everything happening to him was karma. The karma of truth had destroyed his family. His supposed father, Ricardo, quietly packed his bags. He left a single paper on the table with 2 words written on it, "divorce papers," and walked out, despite Brenda's sobs and pleas. Decades of a carefully crafted image of a good wife and mother had vanished in an instant. Ethan, after the initial shock, became eerily quiet, his eyes hollow, completely directionless. He hated his mother, but he couldn't bring himself to leave her. After a few days of wallowing, Brenda's survival instincts kicked in. She knew if she didn't act, she would lose everything. The only target she could latch onto was me. She began a new plan, using her most familiar weapons, tears and pity. She called relatives and friends, weaving a perfectly crafted story. She blamed the entire tragedy on her former daughter-in-law, hiding the truth about Ethan's parentage and painting a picture of a pitiful mother and son who had been abandoned. Brenda fabricated a story that because I couldn't have children, I was blinded by jealousy and deliberately concocted stories to ruin her son's happiness. She turned me into a villain who had deserted a suffering husband and a crumbling family. Her tears and sorrowful tales quickly gained sympathy. People began to whisper. The gossip centered around me. She didn't stop there. She visited our old neighbors, bringing gifts and crying, asking them to speak well of Ethan, to paint a picture of a pitiful husband who suffered from loving too much. Her goal was clear: to create public pressure so that in any further legal proceedings, I would appear to be at fault, thereby tilting the division of assets in their favor. It was a dirty game of public opinion, but effective on those who didn't know the truth. But she didn't know that every one of her lies was being recorded. The trap she was setting would ultimately be for herself. I wasn't angry. I was amused. I waited for my counterattack. I decided not to engage in a media battle, but to let the law speak for me. I called my lawyer, Attorney Miller, and instructed him to prepare 2 lawsuits, one against Brenda Hayes for defamation, and another against Ethan Hayes for grand larceny and embezzlement, demanding the return of nearly $700,000 in misused company funds, not a penny less. Attorney Miller was surprised that I decided to file criminal charges, as the divorce was already final and this would only prolong the conflict. But I insisted. I wanted not just a divorce, but justice. I wanted to force Ethan to be held accountable by the law. I had my lawyer prepare a short press release announcing my lawsuits against Brenda and Ethan, detailing the allegations and stating that all evidence would be presented in court. Chloe said it was a smart move, letting the law and the facts speak for themselves. As expected, within a day, public opinion turned against the Hayes family. Brenda's stories began to be questioned now that they were facing legal charges. Their facade quickly cracked. Brenda panicked, blaming Ethan and forcing him to find me to withdraw the lawsuits. But Ethan was powerless. They had fallen into their own trap. They never expected my silence to be a period of preparation. I knew this wasn't the final blow, but I was no longer afraid. I had the truth, the law, and an unexpected ally who was also preparing to make a move. While the Hayes family was in chaos, Crystal also began to fight back. After the initial shock of the betrayal, she decided to seek justice for her son. When the DNA truth was revealed, she remembered that night, where besides Ethan, there was another man named Rick. For the first time, she wasn't sure who the father was. A ray of hope emerged. Crystal found Rick's number and called him. After some hesitation, she told him everything: the relationship with Ethan, the broken engagement, and the DNA test results. Rick listened silently and only asked about the baby. When he learned the baby was premature, he immediately booked a flight, saying he was coming to see his son. Back in her hometown, one look at the baby was all Rick needed. No test was necessary. All the features were his. He embraced the child, apologized to Crystal, and promised to take care of both of them. Access. The official DNA test results confirmed a 99.99% match. Soon after, Rick confronted Ethan and Brenda. He declared the child was his and warned them against causing any more trouble. He directly insulted Ethan, threw a stack of cash at him as damages, and told him to disappear. Ethan, stripped of all dignity and standing, was left speechless. But the tragedy of the Hayes family wasn't over. I arrived for a settlement meeting, coldly stating that all feelings had ended on the day of the divorce. My lawyer demanded that Ethan return the nearly $700,000, pay damages, and relinquish all rights to any marital property. When the evidence was presented, Ethan's side couldn't refute anything. Brenda cried and begged, but I refused flatly. I reminded her of everything they had done to me and insisted that I would let the law decide. In front of Ethan, I declared that the weak woman of yesterday was dead, and Brenda's tears were worthless to me now. I left with my lawyers, never looking back, leaving Ethan and Brenda to drown in their despair. After the failed settlement, they understood that any resistance was futile. The evidence was overwhelming, my lawyer was top-notch, and I was no longer the easily manipulated woman they once knew. They had no other option. They resorted to begging. Ethan repeatedly texted me messages of remorse, pleading for another chance, reminiscing about old memories to stir my emotions. But I remained indifferent, forwarding everything to my lawyer as additional evidence of harassment. When she saw I was silent, Brenda came to my hotel and knelt in the middle of the lobby, trying to create public pressure. I coldly asked the management to remove her, or I would call the police. She left in humiliation amidst mocking stares. It didn't end there. One night, Ethan and Brenda knelt in front of the gate of my mansion, begging for forgiveness. I stood on the balcony, looking down at them, devoid of any emotion. They were kneeling not out of remorse, but because they had lost everything. Even as a heavy rain began to fall, I left them there. This was the price for 7 years of my youth and trust. The next morning, they were gone. I knew they finally understood. The tears of a traitor cannot buy forgiveness. In this game, they had lost. And I knew that to truly end it, I had to deliver the final blow. A blow that would make them understand that from the very beginning, they never stood a chance. A few days before the final hearing, I asked Attorney Miller to arrange one last meeting with Ethan. No Brenda, no his lawyer, just me, him, and my lawyer in a cold conference room. Ethan arrived on time, looking weary and years older. I told him directly that this conversation wasn't to negotiate, but so he would understand exactly why he lost. I showed him a statement from a Swiss bank account in my name, with a balance of over $150 million. I calmly explained that the $15 million from the sale of the company was just profits, a fraction of my worth. My entire fortune was in an offshore trust fund, something he could never touch. For 7 years, the money he had spent, the company he had run, was just bait I had intentionally left for him. Ethan completely crumbled. He finally understood that he had been fighting over scraps, that all his schemes had been under my control from the start. When he asked why, I replied, "It was a 7-year character test, and you failed because of your greed." I walked out, leaving him to his hopeless sobs. The final blow wasn't money or the law. It was the truth. The final court hearing was swift. Ethan bowed his head and pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to several years in prison. His accomplices also received appropriate punishments. The Hayes family was completely ruined. As for me, I sought no fame or praise. This victory gave me only one thing: peace, because all debts had been paid. I had finally closed that dark chapter of my life. My new work is busy but meaningful. I meet and listen to women who have experienced violence, deception, or have lost their way after a divorce. In them, I see myself and my mother from years ago. So I accompany them, not out of pity, but out of understanding. I use my bitter experience to show them the traps, to give them confidence and courage. Seeing them rise up, smile, and take control of their lives, I realized, is more valuable than any multi-million-dollar transaction. I fulfilled my promise to justice. I helped a woman named Miss Peterson reopen her case to reclaim her property and find peace. Together, we planted seeds of hope for other women. One afternoon, sitting beside my mother, watching the sunset, I realized that happiness now is peace, the ability to live true to myself. The past is over. There is no more fear or doubt. I have stepped into the light, turned my pain into strength, and my life has truly begun a new chapter. The money, in this situation, was not the goal but a tool for Isabella to escape the quicksand of betrayal. More importantly, she possessed intellectual freedom and capability. For 7 years, while staying in the background, she quietly enriched her knowledge, managed her own financial empire, and created an invisible armor for herself. This story is a reminder to women to never entrust the entire value of their lives to another person. Love may be important, but it is not everything. Always maintain your own career, skills, and source of income, because that is your dignity, your right to choose, and your own voice. The next lesson is the power of intelligence and composure. Faced with the shock of betrayal, Isabella did not scream or fight, but chose silence as a strategy. She understood that the first to lose their composure is the first to lose. Her calm and calculated silence became her most powerful counterattack. Her victory did not come from revenge, but from justice. When all the evil was exposed, she did not gloat, but found peace. Justice frees a person from anger, while revenge only traps us in the past. In the end, Isabella turned her pain into strength. Instead of stopping to indulge in her victory, she used her own tragedy to establish a foundation, bringing light and hope to other women lost in injustice and despair. That is true rebirth on a grander scale. The pain did not break her. It did not make her a bitter person. Instead, it molded her into a better, stronger, and, most importantly, a more compassionate version of herself. She used the stones thrown at her to build a temple of hope. Each of us, on the journey of life, carries scars, our own wounds, big or small. Isabella's story is a reminder not to let those scars define you. Don't let them be the reason you close your heart and live in bitterness. See them as lessons, as medals of resilience, and if you can, use those painful experiences to help others, to share, to spread understanding and love. When you can turn your personal pain into a benefit for the community, that is the moment you have truly triumphed. Not just against an enemy, but against fate itself. That is the full meaning of the word rebirth. Isabella's story may be fictional, but the lessons it carries are very real and profound. If this story touched you, if it ignited a fire of dignity and courage in your heart, don't hesitate to press the like button, because every like is not just a compliment, but a vote of support for good values, for the strength of extraordinary women.